either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And it is that time of year, that special time where we celebrate our nation's independence by keeping our eyes to the skies and talking about aliens.
Aliens!
Yes. And it's a special year because the government's finally announced that aliens are among us, or they're out there somewhere and no one gives a shit.
Fact. And so we're going to talk about the best alien of them all, Vin Diesel.
Pitch Black.
Yeah!
Yeah. I've been excited for this one, because for me, Pitch Black holds a very special place in my heart. I was talking with my mom about a few months ago when I started research on this one, and came to the timeline of when I saw this movie. It was sometime after I had seen Alien.
Ah, yes.
But it was still within the time frame of early memories and contributed to my lifelong fear of the dark.
Fair. This movie will do that to you.
Yes.
This one is one of my favorites. First off, because I'm a huge Vin Diesel fan. I think he's a fantastic actor. I love just about everything that he's in, and this is one of his beginning roles.
Mm-hmm.
But I like this movie on top of that because this was the first, quote-unquote horror movie that I found another friend because of.
Ah.
Because at the time, especially because I went to a small school, we didn't have, your options were limited.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I had friends, but none of us were horror friends. I had friends who were into Disney. I had friends who were into horses. I had friends who were into, fantasy, but I was kind of the only horror person. And then after this movie came out, I was like, have you seen this magical masterpiece? And I had a friend who was like, yes. Did you know there are others like it?
Ah. Yeah, I totally feel you there. My group of friends until really moving here, I've never had a core group of friends that were super into horror. My dad and I will watch shitty horror and very specific ones that we think, oh, this is going to be bad, and then turns out to be solid.
Yeah, those are the best.
Specifically, I remember one I was watching with my dad, I think it was back when I still lived in Nebraska. It's called Summer of Blood, or S.O.B.
Yes.
Starts off really, we thought, oh, this is going to be awful. And then we get to, that point in the movie, and it's this is actually kind of gold.
Yes.
Yeah, and Pitch Black definitely falls into that.
It looks like crap from the rundown of what's going on, from the list, especially nowadays, getting the list of actors, you're like, this is a B horror film, right?
Yeah.
And then you truly get into it, and even past the age, even past the CGI that has aged, it's aged.
It's aged, but I would say it still holds up. It's
still spooky.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if you know what's going to happen, this is one of those really good action sci-fi horrors that still gets you just a little bit.
Exactly. And so, before we get into Pitch Black, what are we drinking?
Well, we're doing a combo today. We have, of course, whiskey in honor of Paris, the pompous little bastard stuck on a desert planet.
Yes, and not just any whiskey. We broke into my expensive reserves of Japanese Kiyokori, I think it is. It's a single malt whiskey that I picked up in Omaha last time I was in town. Because Hy-Vee, for some reason, has a great selection of Japanese whiskey.
Fantastic.
Cheers.
Cheers. Excellent. And of course we have water.
Yes, because water was the main thing. We thought about doing Jack Daniels.
We did.
But we never actually see them drink Jack Daniels. We just see them scrape off the labels on the bottles that don't match a lot of the other bottles in the movie.
Exactly. Which makes me wonder if, the story implies that the science team who's dead and they find their base, we'll get to later, if they were the ones who brought Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
And also, why is Jack Daniels the only product placement in this entire movie?
I'll get into it. I don't think it's product placement in this one.
They snuck it in. Jack
maybe.
Daniels got free advertisement.
Yes. And so, for those who don't know, Pitch Black is a 2000 action horror sci-fi flick, written by Jim and Ken Wheat, as well as David Twohy. who also directed the film.
Yes.
It stars Vin Diesel,
Yes, it
Rhoda
does.
Mitchell,
Yep.
and Cole Hauser, as well as a fairly recognizable assortment of cast. I think one of them is like on Stargate or something.
Yeah, nowadays the cast list sounds a little more impressive. When this movie came out, none of these people were famous yet.
Nope. And before I really get into it, my sources for this episode are multiple commentaries from Twoey, Diesel, and Hauser, as well as producer Tom Engelman, visual effects supervisor Peter Chang, as well as the essays Where the Night Things Flit, The Monsters of Pitch Black by Simon Ward, and Hunter in the Dark by Mark Shapiro, all of which are included on the excellent Arrow Video edition of Pitch Black.
Yeah, one of the few times where the double take of a commentary was actually good.
Yeah, really good. Of which, if you do go into it, there's a lot of technical nerd shit out there that went over my head, especially in like the effects and producers commentary.
Yeah, that one.
But it is still an interesting listen.
Definitely. And also a really good insight into why those of us who are really big Vin Diesel fans feel justified in being such good Vin Diesel fans.
Oh.
Because his director eye, even from back then, was really solid and really helped shape this movie.
Oh yeah, especially the essay Where the Night Things Flit. I didn't realize like how much of like an artsy background Vin Diesel has. Like I always assumed because of Fast and the Furious,
yes,
that he was just kind of this meathead, just good enough actor for what he did. But because of this podcast specifically and going through Triple X and Pitch Black, he is a much
he's much more rounded actor than a lot of people think he is.
Yeah, and more intentional and self-aware of how he appears.
Yes, and he also has a really good eye for framing and play with his characters and the other characters in the story, which you see really nicely in the commentary of Pitch Black.
Yes. And listeners, I apologize. It is hot, the AC is on, and my computer fan is running.
It's too dang hot.
I apologize if I can't fully edit this out.
It's Midwestern summertime now.
It is frustrating, but anywho, I'm sorry. But anywho, Twoey was approached to help flush out an already existing script that the producers thought had potential. It was originally called Nightfall, but they thought it was too close to the works of Isaac Asimov.
Yeah.
Who I'm not familiar with.
I haven't read his works. I have read excerpts from his works, and I could see how, even though I would argue they are not the same story, they are that weird parallel line that if you know it exists and you go ahead with your project, people are gonna point fingers. Okay. And it's that weird line where you could argue, like, no, I didn't, but, like, you already knew, might as well pivot.
It's like Inception to Paprika or Black Swan to Perfect Blue.
Yeah, they're close enough that them pivoting was truly a good plan. It set them apart.
Okay. Yeah, and Twoey was also given the script because some of his previous sci-fi work.
Yes.
I learned he was a writer on, I think, Critters 2.
Yeah. He had his list, for those of us who are into the, like, it was an okay horror film, but you had a good time watching it. His name pops up more frequently. Yeah,
and there's actually quite a bit of people who will pop up, and I'll bring up references to what they've done before or since.
Yes.
So also from this, all three main protagonists were actually highly interested in the roles. And Diesel actually wasn't originally considered because the studio wanted a big name tied to the movie. And,
that's pretty common.
Yeah. And they had given Twoey a suggestion saying, hey, we want this guy to be the actor. And he stood his foot down. He's like, no, I'm not working with them. And because they were a pain in the ass, apparently. He didn't say who it was, but, then came along Diesel, who they said didn't really read well on tape, but he had the look they were going for. And so they gave it a go. And everyone seems really proud of the fact that they're like, we're not going to work with this asshole. We want this guy.
Yeah, they spent a lot of time in the commentary really harping on the fact that they wanted people who were going to work hard for the film and not just stand around and wait for their stunt doubles to finish stuff for them.
Yes, and this was actually Diesel's major breakout role, because at least in mainstream, because before he had been doing small art house films.
Yeah, little things.
Yeah.
And I think the only thing big that most people recognize now is his voice in Iron Giant, the animation.
Well, I think Iron Giant was after this, just shortly after this. And also, he at the time, he was actually wanting to be a director and writer and was throwing around pitches to people, kind of doing acting on the side.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, for the type of, and to show kind of the headspace that Diesel gets in, he took yoga and listened to classical music to get into the role of Riddick, who he described as some kind of gothic panther.
I like it.
The way he talks about shit makes me think of the same way Nicolas Cage talks about stuff.
Yes, he does remind me a lot of Nicolas Cage as far as, like, his devotion into digging into a character who I think a lot of actors would just give more of a surface level background thought to. Both of them spend a lot of time putting together a character background to a character that does not have a background in this film.
Yeah, or has a very minimal one.
Yes, but to the point where Vin Diesel got other actors on set interested in Riddick's character and, like, the background and the lore behind this character, who didn't have lore, didn't have background at the time of, like, the writing for this, or even most of the filming of this, to the point where they're like, what if we did more of them?
Yeah, well, and also he said, like, he was insufferable to work with, because the more he got into it, the more aggressive, and until Riddick's character starts opening up.
Yes.
But that was his intention, and honestly, I think it plays off quite well.
I do too. There's a lot of scenes of tension that build really nicely, and all of the characters' interactions with each other read really well in this film, which is good, because honestly, it's a movie in the dark.
Yeah.
And there are two monsters in this movie, which we don't usually get. Two separate opposing monsters. Not for this sort of action film.
By monsters, you mean humans?
Okay, we'll get into that at the end. Because there is lore now to Riddick because of Vin Diesel.
Yeah, well,
we'll get into that later.
Yeah. As well, side little interest, he prioritized Pitch Black over the Fast and the Furious.
Yeah, which didn't make the Fast and the Furious franchise super happy, and they made him make a deal to say he'd come back and keep doing them. Which is why he's still in them.
And now we have 9.
At least.
9 plus a spinoff. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, into Pitch Black. We open on a deep space shot of a freighter-looking ship going into a comet's tail. So we already know they're in danger.
Yes, because those of us who know nothing about space will tell you that comet tails are very dangerous.
Space is terrifying.
Space is terrifying, but I have it on good authority from a friend who does astrophysics that comet fields, not that scary.
Really?
Comets are really far apart. Like, really, really, really far apart.
Oh, yeah, I know comets are, but, like...
Yeah, apparently it's not as bad as the movies make it out to be. But, you know, where's the tension?
Yeah, well...
Where's the tension in empty space?
There's a whole movie on that.
Yes, there is.
That's multiple movies on that. And so the title card appears as Vin Diesel begins to narrate why he is there and complain to the audience about the cast of characters in the cryo chambers as we cut to the ship's interior. And so I actually kind of want to talk about a little bit of stuff before we get into the action, because one, I like this because we are immediately establishing who Vin Diesel's character is, and that he is different from the rest of the crew. And because of that, because the primal part of his brain's more active, he immediately feels more dangerous.
Yes.
Initially.
Yes.
As well, the ship feels like a freighter, and that's because the director intentionally made all the objects and weapons in this movie recognizable to make it more character-driven over trying to look at the set pieces and be like, oh, that's futuristic, which he specifically said he was heavily inspired by Alien to do this.
Yes, it definitely feels like it belongs between there and Tatooine.
Yes. And so with this, mini comets begin to rip through the hole, killing the captain and waking the crew. The deep space opening was actually not in the original script, but was put in there because the initial test audiences were confused by all of a sudden people just dying and who knows what exactly.
Yeah. And while it is a little bit like, it's the only narrative-y part of the movie, which can feel a little awkward when you think about it too hard, it works in the fact that this is the most dialogue that Riddick really gets in the film, which works really well, especially from a later franchise standing, because he does get more dialogue in the other films.
Yes.
And so it does balance it out, because otherwise he'd be like the weird stoic guy who suddenly like can do a lot of things, and we don't know why. Yeah,
exactly. Also, it is the only part of the movie that was done in the UK.
Yes. And fun fact, the shots of Vin Diesel in his cryogenic tube, apparently those doors truly did close and everything.
Yeah.
A little bit claustrophobic for a lot of the crew, including Vin Diesel. All of them complained about this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame them.
Especially because it sounds like everyone, especially Vin Diesel, had to wear restraints for the scene, because he's supposed to be the prisoner. It says real big across the top, like, do not open, warning, Stitch inside. And Vin Diesel's just a more aggressive Stitch, let's be true.
With less legs.
with 2 less legs, so that we know
of. And so, as the crew members awaken, they realize that they are in bigger trouble as the ship begins to free fall onto some random planet, which I love the Jurassic Park alarm sounds.
I also love the Jurassic Park sounds. I also love how the audience has enough time to sit there and think to themselves, why is there a random planet in the way? Did y'all not calculate for this at all?
No.
No.
Not at all. Well, and the planet's not really even in the way, it's the comet tail,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to save them from supposedly dying even faster, bits of the cargo train start getting dropped so that they can, quote-unquote, level the nose. This is space. I don't know how space flying works, but apparently being level is really important.
Well, they're falling into gravity.
Sure.
Yeah.
I feel like going up and down is just as dangerous as flat. They're a big box.
Either way, it's action.
It is action, and it is intense, and we get the first moral dilemma of the film.
Well, moral dilemma, but I also like how they set up our female protagonist, where it's mentioned that she's it's implied that she's relatively new, because they said they trained you for this, right?
And she's, as the true new person, like 10 minutes worth of training.
I mean, we had a semester of this in college 5 years ago.
Yeah, I totally learned how to use this program, I swear.
Yeah. And so, yes, we do go into our first moral dilemma, because as she's trying to level everything out, she's going to drop the loads that's around them, which means the crew and everything else.
Yes, and this cargo ship is now carrying passengers, and those are the people who she's like, we could just lose them and we'd be fine.
Yeah, they'd understand.
They totally understand. Also, they're asleep. They're fine. They'll never know what hit them.
Yeah, and as she tries to pull the latch to drop them, because she was just going to do it,
yes,
it jams, and the ship begins to skid to the surface. Interesting bit. The landing shots for this were actually done on a helicopter that flew so low to the ground that the skids hit.
I love how we've moved in film and filming, because we now get shots much closer to the ground thanks to drones. And the fact that they had to load up all of their big cameras onto a helicopter and probably do this pass multiple times until they got physically as close to the ground without dying as possible.
Yeah.
Just really blows my mind.
I mean, safety measures have changed. Yeah. And also at this point, I kind of want to talk about some of the weird editing choices in this movie.
Yeah.
Because specifically, there's this weird camera warp / distortion that's just kind of happens for a fraction of a second. It doesn't fit, but for everything else that's going on, I mean, I think he was trying to go for something very old school of like confusion and trying to figure stuff out. But what I do like about this scene is the intercutting of like it's really a frantic cutting between like the instruments, the sirens going off, and then an eye searching around trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do next.
Yes.
And I think that's part where the editing of this movie really starts to shine, is in some of these moments.
Yes. And there is definitely some questionable camera work. I think Towie was trying to play with a camera more than he had in the past. There's a lot of shots that are purposefully out of focus. There's a lot of shots that the only shot, like you said, which is kind of blurry, but out of sync with the rest.
It comes up one more time in the movie.
Yes.
And that's the only time it happens again. Like, if it was a motif that kept repeating,
yes,
then I would understand, but like...
I think the motif was too broad for this one. It was a lot of camera play, and it was all in like a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Which apparently his cameramen really hated, because they're used to being told if they get something out of shot or wonky, that's it. That's the end of you working on this.
Yeah.
And he kept having to be like, no, really, more out of frame, more out of focus.
Yeah, it makes me think of, I recently watched that Ed Wood documentary, or biopic, and like a lot of his production was like, but he bumped into the side. Cool, gotta keep going, got another shot to do. Because this was a tight shot. Yes. I think they shot everything in like 63 days.
Yes, it was fast.
Yeah. And so, as the passengers get up and search the ship, one seems more worried, and as he should be, because the prisoner has escaped.
Stitch is free.
Yeah, who Stitch proceeds to try and strangle him with his leg restraints, but gets knocked the fuck out.
Yes, he does.
Which, maybe our prisoner is not as dangerous as we once thought.
Yeah, I think Vin Diesel explained it during his interview that this beginning part is supposed to be Riddick coming out of the cryogesis and not having full control over his, like, upper thought process, or however he described it. And if you want to dissect it that far, I think it works, that argument, but I think most audiences don't get that deep when watching at least this part of Riddick. So, action scene, prisoner attack, spooky.
Yeah, exactly. As well, a stowaway is found, and the other crew member who was trying to actually save the passengers dies, leaving a cryptic message. Don't touch that lever.
Don't touch the lever.
Yes. And so the prisoner is left on the ship as we cut to the outside, where there are a group of Muslim pilgrims praying, and the others survey the landscape and wreckage. I like this, and I want to go into a little bit of the film setting. First off, it immediately establishes that this part of the planet is on a desert.
Yes.
Already parallel enough.
Oh, yeah.
Great initial shots. Also, how lucky are they that they can breathe on this planet?
Yes. And I also like a desert planet. I also like that they go ahead and explain why the whole planet is a desert, as opposed to leaving it
just a desert planet.
Yes.
Which they do in stages, which is great.
Yes. But we get right from the get-go, there's too many suns in the goddamn sky.
Not yet.
True.
Which is one thing this movie does fantastically, is like the layering of little details to help build up. So, couple things of interest. Pitch Black was filmed in an area of Australia called Cobber Petty. I might have butchered that. Which was the same location of the 1979 film Mad Max.
Not just any Mad Max.
Thunderdome.
The best Mad Max.
Still have not seen that one yet.
It's the best one, I swear. It's my favorite. But the thing about this area of Australia, as I have been told from some first-hand accounts, it gets crazy hot in the summer. It's a literal desert, and it's also Australia desert hot.
Well,
So how do you keep from burning your actors alive?
You film in the winter when it's cold as shit.
So, all of the scenes where they are glistening sweat and pretending to be so hot, they are not. The high was like 10 degrees.
10 degrees Celsius, I think, is the way they describe it, because a lot of them are Brits.
Yeah, so, I think, we're ranging around the 50-degree mark for the American audience, and so they keep having to mist them down with water to make them look sweaty in the cold, in the desert.
Closer to 20s, 30s. It's still cold as shit.
It's too freaking cold.
Yeah. And, so, also as well, the filming location was also used for the other 2000 film, Red Planet.
A good one.
And down the line, Kangaroo Jack.
Another favorite.
I still haven't seen that one, but
You'd hate it.
I know of it. I know of it. It was popular when I was a kid, but never watched it.
Yeah, that's about the age range that's a good one to watch.
Yeah. Another little tie-in, the cinematographer, David Egby was chosen for filming this area because he knew it quite well because he also filmed Mad Max.
Yes.
Yes.
Also, the ship that we see crashed in this scene, it's still there, apparently. There's a town nearby that bought it and is like, we film things here, and you can still go look at it.
Yeah, which is... I've noticed some stuff with these little way out of the way Australian places, because the other one that I'm relatively familiar with is Snowtown.
Yes.
Because I do want to go there. They like to capitalize on like these little tour... It's very American in their tourism.
Yeah, these small towns in Australia would get along really well with, like, the Kansas small towns that have, like, the biggest ball of twine, the world's biggest golfer, the world's biggest troll made out of sticks.
Snowtown. It's barrels of fun.
That is right up the American Route 66 aesthetic.
Yeah. For those who don't know, Snowtown was this small suburb in Australia where a dude brutally murdered a bunch of men because they were corrupting the youth in society because they were homosexuals or potentially homosexuals, and then dissolve their bodies in barrels. And so, hence, barrels of fun.
Yeah, so what do you do with that terrible knowledge? Capitalize on it.
Exactly. And now I want to go there.
And I was going to say, we can't fault them. Literally all of our terrible people here in America have a theme park / like museum thing that you can go visit.
Yeah.
Some of them are more tastefully done than others.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Also, for a desert, luck on this whole entire thing was not on their side because, the filming was delayed because of torrential downpours.
Yeah.
Historically, torrential downpours.
Which really don't vibe with the whole, super desert planet.
Mm-hmm. And so, to help cover this up, they use what was called a bleach bypass.
Yes.
Which is also known as skip bleach, and it's a chemical effect used on negatives to retain silver in the film during color film production that results in a black and white image over a color image and allows for a better diffusion of light through the film.
Yes, and ended up kind of branding the entire Riddick franchise with a signature quote-unquote look, which ended up working really well because there's a lot of people who that was their aesthetic. Yeah.
And so the other thing too is that this technique was the producers weren't super happy with it because this technique has to be done to the original film stock. And that made the producers very, very leery of doing it at all.
I mean, yeah, could ruin the whole thing.
Exactly. And also the CG people prefer to have clean stock to work with.
I mean, yeah.
To remember, this is 2000. We're still working specifically in film.
Oh, yeah. No.
Physical film. And also, the history of it it had a poor history because there was another film shot in Australia in the 70s, I think, that they had done this process to the original film. And after they'd done it, the producer said, no, we're not going to go through. We don't want to do the whole effects over it. And so the movie looked really weird because everything was done specifically because of that technique.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, also a little bit about this scene too. The Muslims praying was a little bit difficult to do or to figure out because one, we're not on Earth, so finding Mecca is
a challenge when you don't know which way Mecca is supposed to be.
And specifically New Mecca for the film.
Yes.
Yes. And originally they had wanted to face different directions for the cardinal directions. They're back facing each other.
Yeah, because then your bases are covered.
But, and that was even harder to do because the children in the movie were actually Muslim children.
Yeah, so they had a good argument to be like, yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, and so they ended up having them face each other because each other are home kind of thing. Which...
it worked out.
Yeah, exactly. As well, one thing to note, no one exactly knew why the Muslim pilgrim characters were even added to the film or who even suggested. But I personally think it works.
I do too.
Because they add just that little level of it's not just an antique dealer or criminal transport. Like, it's basically a space bus or space plane. Well, it's a space bus.
It's a space bus, but it also has like a Spirit Airlines vibe to it, where like these feel like discount tickets. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, like Ryanair.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Spirit is notorious for, like, standing room only, carry-on only, like, sometimes not even carry-on, like, you and your body can get on the plane and that's it.
Mm.
And because of the eclectic group that survives this plane crash, and the fact that everyone who's on it seems to have, like, a weird reason to be on a cargo ship, because they don't hide the fact that this is a cargo bus, really gives it that feel of, like, everyone on here was here for the budget, like, aspect of it. And so this poor, like, field trip of pilgrims got the real short end of this stick.
Yeah.
But they also balance it out with having, like, a purity and like a pure morality to them.
Yeah.
Where everyone else in this film, in some way, you could justify them being stuck and not feel as bad. Whereas these are literal children who are on a pilgrimage to go to their Holy Land and are stuck on a terrible planet with a terrible man.
Yeah, they're the most tragic part of this movie.
And you need some tragic characters to kill in a horror film, I think.
Yeah, actually,
one.
That is a good point, because that was my biggest complaint with the Friday the 13th franchise, is it didn't have those tragic characters.
Yeah.
For the most part, they're just kind of like, they're fodder for the killer.
Yeah, and this movie breaks molds with its other characters, like the female character who, in classic 80s and 70s horror, would be that character.
The final girl.
Yeah. She's not the morally good person. We established at the beginning. She's the one who's going to dump everybody's asses so that she doesn't die. We find out the police officer, who's not a police officer, he's not morally good. And then the only other child on the boat wants to be a murderer.
Yeah.
So, like, we need somebody here who's not crazy. And it's these poor kids.
And their leader.
Yeah, and their, I don't know, troop master?
I think he's supposed to be their father.
Is he I couldn't tell if he was their father or if he was, like, the field trip administrator.
I can't remember, because I know they do flush it out in the two sequels, kind of.
And it's been a while since I watched them, despite me owning them all.
Same here, and we decided not to do the whole trilogy this time around.
And we also chose not to rewatch them, because normally we'll rewatch stuff even though we're only covering the first one. We picked not to do that with this one, A, for time, but also because when Pitch Black came out, those weren't even considered... Like, this wasn't considered to be a franchise. Yeah,
this was a standalone horror flick.
And so the questions that we have, because we can't remember the sequels, all of the audience would have had until the sequels came out.
Yeah, to
and some
really
of us
nitpick.
still have questions.
There's a lot of questions that the sequels bring up.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, speaking of the morally corrupt, the new captain is praised for her work.
Yeah. Great job, lady.
Which I love this little working in, especially with the payoff. Because that's the other thing, and why I think this movie was so successful, for how arguably bad of a horror flick it is.
No, because it is. It's arguably a bad horror movie.
First off, the stowaway Jack also says, "Thanks for saving our dicks."
Yes.
A phrase I have never heard anyone say.
I will be adding it to my arsenal, though.
Yes.
It shall make my mother upset.
I don't know if I could say anything that would make my mother more upset at this point. But also, this is where we really establish the inner turmoil for the new captain, because she's being praised for an accident.
Yes.
For a malfunction that she had no control over.
And also she is instantly promoted to captain, which it kind of implies that she's jumped multiple ranks to get to that new praise, and she is not ready for that title.
Exactly, because at the very beginning, they trained you for this, right?
Yeah, this is like her first day on the job, it feels like. Maybe she's done this a little while, but she is not captain material.
Yes, and we all have been there.
Oh, for sure.
All have been there. And so, the new captain is informed that the prisoner on board had recently escaped from a maximum security prison.
Yes.
And so, just little building of Riddick's character. Who
I like also that what they tell everyone else is very specific compared to what Riddick told us at the beginning during his narrative.
Yes, and it's very different from what he says later on, too.
Exactly. So, the information being fed now is just adding to the fear of this man.
Yes. And while the others salvage the ship for supplies, Riddick escapes, which none of these characters actually really have names yet.
No, you just kind of do what Christine does, and that is watch things with faces, and it's fine.
I watch a lot of stuff with faces.
But do you ever be like, what's your name? Because I don't.
Oh, no, I cannot tell you. I can tell you what other movies they've been in.
See, I can't. That is just the face that goes in this movie.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And thankfully, everyone's hair in this is significantly different.
Yes.
So I know who everyone is.
Exactly. And so, quite honestly, I actually like this build-up because in the short time we've established who our main trio is going to be, as well as
Definitely.
all of their dilemmas from the get-go.
Yes.
And now we, as I refer to him in the outline until we get his name, the Hunter has now realized that Riddick has escaped. And during this escape, the whole arm over the back,
yes,
Riddick did about 3/4 of the shots.
Yes, where he has his hands tied behind him, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and bringing them up
and you have to dislocate your shoulder to get them all the way over your head.
Up until the point of dislocation is what he got, which everyone was impressed that he had that flexibility for being as beefy of a man as he is.
Apparently he could do the whole thing, he just couldn't do it with the iron bar between his hands.
Yeah.
Which cracks me up because he had to prove that he could do it, so he went ahead and dislocated his shoulders to do this fancy maneuver to then not be able to do it in the set.
Yeah.
And he mentions multiple times that he managed to hurt his shoulders several times in this movie.
One time specifically a little bit later.
Worst.
Yeah.
And then just kept bumping it.
Yeah, well, and not only that, so he was injured, but this film was mainly shot chronologically.
Yes.
Which
is nowadays really rare.
We say that, but half the movies we've covered were shot almost chronologically.
We do have a habit, though, of picking old films. We like picking stuff from the era of actors doing their own shit. Something that I will give Vin Diesel props for. He still does a lot of his own shit.
Yes. As well in this part, there's a flash to how you can see what he's doing despite being blindfolded.
Mm-hmm.
There was a cut scene that he, I'm sad it's a little bit cut because apparently they put a lot of work into it where there's an exposed
blade or piece of metal.
Yeah, that he cuts an opening in, and he actually did that blindfolded.
And that seems like an OSHA problem nowadays, but this is back in the day. Nobody cared. But also that would have been such a cool scene.
To be fair, and it's funny because I was just talking to a coworker about checking OSHA in a day. I don't know if OSHA extends to movies for a good chunk of it.
There's got to be some regulation.
I'm sure there's regulations because, I know there's regulations because a lot of there were a handful of people died in the 20s.
Yes.
And that's when stuff started coming into practice.
I would say, the amount of things in movies that I have seen people accidentally die, and the amount of stuff that people are we have to run through this with a lot of people to make sure we can do it.
Yeah.
Really blows my mind.
Yeah.
But also makes sense because of stunts like this where we try and cut a piece of fabric inches from our eyeballs.
Yeah, and the actor's willing to do that now.
Yeah, the actor's I can totally do that.
Yeah. And so now the survivors set out to explore and find water as the rest of them are now warned about Riddick.
Yes, they have been told of the crazy man.
Yes, and this is where we learn that it's not just a desert, because on the other side, there are 2 suns rising, and we learn that there are 3 suns.
A forever desert.
Yes. And a lot of lens flares that would make J.J. Abrams blush. Yes. But honestly, as annoying as I normally find lens flares, especially in modern cinema, it is very fitting for this type of movie, as well as a movie that's full of 3 suns, where if there was a camera, there would probably be some type of lens flare at one point or another.
Very true. And I also really like that this movie, even when it is not necessarily supposed to be specifically from Riddick's point of view, everything is shot with a weird visual effect because Riddick sees the world with a weird visual effect.
Yes.
And so crazy, obnoxious lens flares kind of tie into this whole we're supposed to be able to have magic special eyeballs. Yeah,
or just vision in general, because that's a big part of this movie.
Yes.
And so, at this point, everyone's exploring, and Riddick is watching constantly.
He's doing his crazy, sneaky Riddick things.
Yeah, and the leader of the Muslim pilgrims explains that they are on their Hajj to New Mecca. This is the first time New Mecca is mentioned at all.
Yes, so we can assume that maybe Earth has had some shit happen, and that's why we're in space?
Yeah. Actually, I would watch a movie about Space Jesus.
I feel like that is already a movie. We just need to find Space Jesus the movie.
I will do some digging after this. I'm sure it's out there.
I feel very confident that is a thing.
It's
not.
Nope. Dune.
Yeah, Dune's kind of...
It's basically Space Jesus. Yeah. Psychic Space Jesus.
Dude, no one said Jesus wasn't psychic the first time around.
True. And so, while they're out searching, the hunter spies trees in the distance and says it's an indicator of water. Side note, for me, the trees from a distance look like a distorted blood or dragon blood tree.
Ooh, yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. And so we now cut back to camp where the antiques dealer is chilling.
Yes.
Just being a real prick.
He is being a real ass.
Also the reason we're drinking expensive stuff.
Yep.
While Aussie dude sets out to dig graves for those who didn't make it.
Because he is a nice man.
Yes. And also the whole time, or during this time frame, the stowaway already has attached themselves to Riddick and is harassing the antique dealer.
Trying to get all the information they can, but also practicing their murder skills.
If this was Riddick, he wouldn't hesitate. Shut up, you edgy little twat.
But actually.
Yeah. And so, we now cut back to the ones who are looking for water, and the trees turn out to be large skeletons as they search, the now bones. The hunter is on edge while Riddick is hiding and still stalking them from comfortably inside the shade of the bones.
And I like this scene's Riddick stalking, because up until this, Riddick just kind of felt like a house cat being a butt. Yeah,
it's like watching Hobbs try and sneak past Charlie.
Yes.
And she's
not sneaky.
No.
She doesn't blend in, but she did it. She made it pass.
She only did it because Charlie didn't go and attack her.
Fact. And so this is the first time where him looming in the background, if you're watching this film seriously, feels scary.
Yeah.
He feels like a looming, ghost monster as opposed to, the serial killer next door who's just running loose because he got free.
Yeah.
This is the first time where he feels serious, out of his cage.
Yeah, no, that is accurate because he's not in a cage and he's not...
He was intimidating all chained up. That was for sure. Especially because we had the flashing lights, we had the weird, do not touch sign.
Mm-hmm.
And, things chained up, as we know from going to many a horror film and horror house, make things more spooky.
Yeah.
But now he's not got those.
Yeah.
But he's still looming behind people without them noticing.
Exactly. And that's what makes it, because there is a part where I just caught it in the many years of rewatching this movie.
He is sneakily in the background of a lot of this. In fact, you could make a drinking game of the Spot Riddick.
Yeah. So one thing I did kind of forget to mention / wrote in the wrong part of my notes. The shot overlooking the graveyard, or the bone graveyard, was actually, part of it was a model. It was a 1/10 scale model.
I love a 1/10.
That was tracked into the shot.
I mean, can't tell. Looks great.
No, exactly. It is a great shot.
Aged really well.
I've also been doing a lot of set design research lately for much bigger projects upcoming.
Yes.
And now we have the hunter who tries to comfort the new captain, but we quickly learn he's really there more to investigate the dying words of "don't touch the handle."
Yes, and this is the first time too where he moves from being the audience feeling like he is a protector figure and that solid good guy who's there for everyone to there's some red flags going off.
Mm-hmm.
He's not yet a bad guy, but we do not fully trust him anymore.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because we also established the second conflict for the new captain as she begins to really struggle with her attempt to kill everyone that she is now kind of trying to save.
Yeah, she feels responsible for it, and also, she kind of got everyone in this mess.
Yeah.
And, I think also part of her mindset is we have to do things together.
Yeah.
She spends a lot of this film trying to prove that they have to do it together to survive.
Yeah.
Which Riddick proves is not true.
We also finally learned their names.
Yes.
The captain's name is Carolyn, and the hunter is referred to as Johns, which is his last name.
It is. I call him Dick-ass throughout this whole film, though.
Dick-ass.
Yeah, because that is what he is.
Sounds like a more adult dick butt.
It is a dick butt joke.
I forgot about dick butt until then.
Yes.
Yeah.
He is a dillweed.
Okay, interesting. Your old-timey insults.
My old-timey insults inform me that this man's name is not Johns, it is Dillweed.
Dillweed. A lot less colorful than the Irish curses I'm learning.
Yes.
Yes. And so, Carolyn then reveals the truth to Johns, as Riddick proceeds to cut and sniff her hair.
Yes, and I like Vin Diesel's explanation of this during the commentaries, because when you watch this without the commentary knowledge, Riddick just really comes off as like the highest level of creep possible. And hearing Vin Diesel's logic behind the invasion of space and safety and self-awareness of your own body really helps solidify like how much he thought about this character and what level of like deranged he was trying to aim for.
Well, not even that. So on this part of it specifically, it was done on the day of. He always thought it was stupid.
Yes.
And which again, he realizes his character, though kind of psychotic, has some level of decency to him.
Yes.
It was just a stupid shot that he just did and hoped it didn't make it, but it did.
Yes.
Also, Hauser mentioned that he could see him the whole time the camera was rolling and had to pretend like he wasn't there.
Yes, because of course he fucking could see him.
Yes.
He's standing like 2 feet away and he's barely in the shadows.
Yeah, barely.
But I know Vin Diesel for this specific one, and later on he leans into it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I know he at the first was like, no, it seems a little out of place, but it ended up working over the long term, because by the end of the film, we, for the most part, have agreed that Riddick, while a terrible murdering bastard, he's not that bad a guy.
I actually, thinking about it, because originally I thought this was a stupid part too.
Yes.
But now thinking of how things progress in the build-up, it starts to creepily build the sexual tension between him and Carolyn.
Yes, which, as terrible as it is to say, really solidified Riddick the franchise, as opposed to a lot of other horror, like single man, super powerful for some reason, monstrous person.
Yeah.
He's sexy. Which, whether or not Vin Diesel wanted it, is just every character Vin Diesel plays.
I got one line that would ruin that part. Hey babe, I like your shampoo.
It's still sexy.
Jesus Christ, no!
Vin Diesel's characters, whether or not people should be, that's part of the Vin Diesel looking character, which he has leaned into later on in his career.
Yeah.
We see that with the progression of the Fast and Furious franchise, and even he plays into it with some of his more comedic roles. And while I know he didn't love it in this specific scene, it helps solidify for a lot of people their desire to keep watching Riddick.
Okay.
Because if he was just a terrible character who had some redeeming qualities at the end, and his redeeming quality is, I'll maybe kill you later, not interesting.
Yeah, true.
Not interesting enough to have as many sequels as this stupid thing has.
Yeah, no, and I agree. There's definitely a lot of heart to this movie.
There is. And for a B, whether or not it's supposed to be a B-style horror film, you have to have some level of sexual tension for audiences to feel like they've got the full, like, horror-rounded franchise. I think it's something left over from the 70s. There's no teenagers in the cabins in the woods in this one. It's just the two characters who are attempting not to murder / be murdered by each other.
Well, and actually it makes me think of, I think it was Frederick Kiesler I was doing a study on, and he like in one of his diagrams, he had specifically like, or I don't think it was him, it might have been some other architect. They actually said like fucking.
Yes.
In like their diagram, and it's like, yeah, that it's rounding off like the human aspects to eat, survive, and spread your genes.
Yes, and whether or not people think Riddick is gross, which in this scene he is being gross and creepy, but without being gross and creepy, he's just murdery.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have some form of rounding for him, like, especially at this point where he is just a human. A murdery human, for him to feel, like, next level scary, you need to add a little bit more there.
I've got, it's the difference between Ed Kemper and, why am I blanking on his name? Ted Bundy.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Both terrible people in their own right. One people feel a little bit more strongly towards.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, both.
I mean, both have strong reactions. I think a lot of people have more disgust for one. At least it sticks harder for them.
Yeah, because Ed Kemper's a 6'8" tall, or 6'9" tall terror.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now we cut to the Aussie digging, and then cut right back to the main group trying to find or stumbling upon a geological survey camp that they begin searching. I like in this part how they slowly introduce the solar-powered equipment.
I do too.
I also think the whole no lights installed because no darkness is hella stupid.
It is hella stupid because as architects we know that just because there's light outside doesn't mean there's lights inside. As
the movie also shows, some of those settings are pretty dark even if they open the vents.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's one of those things where, like, sure, you could have ambient light, but does that ambient light let you read that specific piece of thing that you're looking at? Probably not. But we will overlook it because I feel like the writers felt clever about it, and I congratulate them on their cleverness.
I agree. And so in the camp, we find an escape shuttle, which initially gives us that initial inkling of hope that their case is not
It's at least
lost.
Something.
Exactly. And from there, we cut back to the crash where weird noises are heard. And because it's heard, which is weird because it's heard from the antique dealer.
Yes.
And he goes to harass the Stargate chick and Jack about it. And it's like, oh, it wasn't us. And then we hear more noises and someone approaching, which we get this weird inverse color effect. And it's the only time, if I remember right, this happens in the movie.
I think so.
And they're afraid it's going to be Riddick, which it turns out it's not Riddick, but another passenger, who is then shot by the Aussie who thought it was Riddick, which is great because now he's got blood on his hands. Yes. First kill of the movie.
It also, like, eliminates him as our morally, like, neutral ground person.
And on top of that, it also makes us realize that no one's actually described Riddick.
Yeah, no one knows what this man looks like other than, dickweed.
Yeah, unless it's something that was cut that I didn't see.
No, I think you're right. And I also think it kind of solidifies this idea that, like, this was cargo shippy, and so there's a huge possibility that everyone got on board, got put in their cryo-sleepy state with their pajamas on and whatnot, and then they just loaded everything else on, which probably included the murderer that I'm sure these people would not have bought tickets to sit next to.
Actually, now that you bring that up, I think this is, off the top of my head, the only movie I can think of where they go into cryostasis and they're in regular-ass clothes instead of underwear.
Yes, which I appreciate because, like, it does make logical sense.
Yeah.
But also, like, I miss the idea of, like, going to sleep in your jammies. Because that was one of the things from, like, those, like, the TV shows that all had cryostasis for fill-in whichever fancy episode you had here. They all had, unless everyone always wore pajamas, looking at you, Star Trek, like, everyone had, quote-unquote, sleeping clothes. Why? You don't know. And, like, don't you want to be able to, like, get off the ship and not have to get changed?
Yeah.
It logically makes sense, especially if this is budget airline and you're not getting, like, a complimentary meal halfway through the trip.
Well, I think it was also just something that was just the remnants, because I remember I had pajamas.
Yes.
And now I just wear the same shorts I was wearing through the day.
I have worn the same pair of pajamas for years now, because they're the only pajamas I like, and I can't find new ones that match the aesthetic.
I mean...
I found them at Walmart, and I haven't been able to find a pair to replace them, so I've just got real tatty ones. But you know what? They are jammies, and I have a drawer for just the jammies.
The specific drawer for the pair of jammies.
For the one pair of jammies I have, yes.
Yeah.
I was supposed to get some for my birthday one year, but
Is this the year Brian forgot?
No. The place that they were ordered from never delivered them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have to order more. Curses.
I'm sorry I blame this immediately on you, Brian. I'm not, because you've also forgotten like twice in the 3-4 years I've known you.
It's okay. But do these people have jammies? No. Because Riddick and jammies would be too silly.
And there is a budget.
There is a budget. Everyone gets one pair of clothes.
Yes. And so, from this part, after the dude dies, we zoom into Riddick, who is lounging in the antiques dealer's chair a little bit away.
Drinking his fancy whiskey.
How the fuck do they not see him?
I don't know, but I also like how he wasn't supposed to be there originally.
Yes.
He was supposed to pop up from behind a rock, like one of those stupid whack-a-mole games. And instead he was like, what if I was in the chair?
Or just, it was supposed to be like him just kind of peeking around the rock, like,
which I understand.
Hey, what you doing?
Yeah, I understand, like, the thought process of, like, oh, he's in the background, but, like, that's not scary, that's silly. Him in the chair, while silly, still feels scary, because it feels like he's invading their privacy.
Well, and on top of that, it was suggested by Diesel, because he thought it would be great, because now Riddick is doing whatever the fuck he wants.
Yes, and it also gives him more of a character, as opposed to just being murdery asshole.
Sneaky, sneaky.
He is now also an alcohol thief.
The worst.
The worst kind of thief.
Yes. And so, we now cut back to the geological camp where, we learn that the shuttle is out because reasons.
Yeah.
They
do the standard sci-fi thing where they say a couple of things are broken and why don't you work on this thing and that thing, and, like, none of those things you know or recognize and you don't care. Exactly.
Which they hear gunshot in the background, which cues them to come back.
Yes, because, you know, I'm sure that will help.
Yeah, just some of the weird pacing of this movie, which is fine. I mean,
for the first one of this franchise, I can't complain too much.
Yeah, and for the first half of the movie, there's a fair amount of cutting back and forth between stuff, especially the director's cut, which we forgot to say this at the start. We decided to do the director's cut specifically and going forward if we can.
Yes.
Just because those are the more true to the vision of the director cuts rather than having studio involvement.
Yes, and also if you can get those, the few extra scenes that they did cut usually are the ones that people like the best.
Exactly, or they help round out a little bit here and there, which we'll get into in a little bit. And so we now come back to the crash where the Aussie is carrying the new body that he created.
Yeah, whoops.
To the grave, where he finds a hole, and as he begins to investigate, he's killed by something.
But what is it?
Exactly. Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum.
Side note, this is the first time, this is the scene where I first saw that as the Aussie's carrying him, Riddick is hiding behind some bone or giant rock feature.
He's like totally in the background, like, where's Waldo?
Yeah, it's real quick, and to be fair, I mean, it's been probably a good 5 or 6 years since I've seen the Riddick movies.
Yeah, but he does pop into a lot of backgrounds. Sometimes it's obvious and they, like, point him out to you, and sometimes he's just back there.
Yeah. It's great.
I like. I kind of wish they had continued that theme.
Yeah. Also, even when I first saw this movie back when I was a kid, really young, I don't think this death is as mysterious as they want it to be at this point.
Yeah, they definitely, especially hearing the director's commentary, they definitely were trying to make it be like, well, was it Riddick? Or was it something else? But the way he is torn apart, the amount of blood just kind of everywhere, and the fact it's next to the random hole, and we just saw Riddick not a second before, is not very sneaky.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is scary, because we don't know what ate him.
Exactly.
Is it land sharks? Could be land sharks.
Well, at one day we will do Arkansas Women's Prison Massacre.
Yes, we will.
That atrocity of a movie.
It is terrible.
Yeah, and so as Stargate chick, I can't remember her actual name in the movie.
She's gonna be dead soon, don't worry about it.
she comes to investigate the hole, and she sees Riddick watching over everything. Riddick goes on the run, only to be captured by the hunter.
Yes.
And we get our first shot, point of view shot of Riddick's eyes.
Yes.
Which, I wanted to do some digging in on this, but I ran out of time because I didn't remember until someone on Laffenstein's Discord brought this up.
Yes.
Which, by the way, Laffenstein's fun to watch. He's great Dead by Daylight horror channel. I love his shit. I was gonna do a little bit of digging, because the guy who did The Color Out of Space, he's one of the first people to do, like, monster vision, like, POV of the monster. Yes. But I started doing a little digging, but then I started realizing, wait, this point of view shot stems back to, like, Peeping Tom, who's really the monster, and it's like, I don't have time for this rabbit hole the day before recording. And so once Riddick's caught, Carolyn interrogates him, but Riddick is, very composed and cryptic as he informs her that he is not the problem now.
Yeah, you got bigger, badder things to deal with other than him.
Yeah. This is also Riddick's actual first piece of dialogue in the movie. We're 30 minutes in.
Yeah, when you're a murdering person hiding in the desert, you don't get a whole lot of lines.
Yep, because remember, the opening monologue was not originally part of the script.
Exactly. I do have some fun facts about his eyes.
Yes, I was going to get into that in a second, because Jack is listening and sees Riddick's eyes, and they want a shine job now. They
do want a shine job. And so the contacts that Diesel is wearing for this film to get the glossy, like, light in the back of the eye sort of look, they were created for the film. Mm-hmm. They were not tested before the film.
Nope.
Diesel was the first one to put them on.
They were apparently very painful.
They were apparently real painful. So that's why, especially in this one compared to later films, he wears the goggles so much. It makes sense. He does a good job of trying to balance wearing the goggles when it would make sense for Riddick the character to want to wear the goggles. But also because if he wasn't wearing the goggles, he had to wear the contacts. The contacts hurt. And they got stuck to his eye at one point, and they had to fly a guy in to help get them off.
Yep, they were fully mirrored contacts.
They were. And at one point, you could buy them. Can't anymore. They have been discontinued. But you could have bought them, and they were, of course, named the Shine Job.
Which sounds like a odd search in Pornhub.
It does. But also, like, I have had some fun looking into the, like, costumey eye contacts in the past, and the names of them, that one's not even the weirdest. They have a lot of fun naming those suckers.
Incognito mode search. Yeah. I've done that a couple times on, like, things that I thought were, like, innocent, and then I look up images.
Like, dang it.
I am glad I'm not at work searching this shit.
Whoops.
Yeah. And so, Riddick is sticking to his story that he did not kill the Aussie. Oh, I think his name is Zeke.
Yeah, he's a dead man now.
Yeah, and tells Carolyn to look deeper.
Deeper. Because of course Riddick is a cryptic motherfucker.
Yes, and adds to the plot.
Yeah.
And, so this next part was actually not in the theatrical version, and it was added to the DVD version, which I think adds to it, because originally it cut to her going in. But Johns tries to dissuade her, saying that she's just doing this for redemption. Again, further cementing her arc of she's really doing this for redemption because she feels bad because she almost killed everyone.
But they don't know that.
Yet. And so Carolyn crawls into the hole to finds a cavern, but she is not alone. And there's something in the background. This is my favorite part of the commentary, because Hauser made the comment that you're welcome, all you 12-year-old boys in the audience.
Because there's a little bit of titty.
There is a very deep cleavage shot, and I'm not complaining.
No one was complaining.
No one was complaining. It was a very nice shot.
We had to balance out all of those biceps.
Yes. But I also love these dark shots as well, because
I do too.
Apparently the set looked like shit when it wasn't lit properly. And Diesel was also worried about showing the creatures a bit too early, which is kind of interesting, because after the fact, it seems like Diesel had a lot more say or comments into the movie.
Yes.
While this was making, despite being kind of or being a newcomer to a major feature film.
Yes, and I think the thing that was also very interesting to listen to was a lot of his concerns are very valid concerns that a lot of directors nowadays make when they're going into, especially a monster horror film.
Yeah.
You don't want to show your monster too early, otherwise it becomes that weird, cheesy, Sharknado-y style thing.
Yeah, or it's very classic Dracula and Frankenstein of we see the monster 5 minutes into the movie.
Especially since we're dealing with a monster, since we're excluding Riddick from this conversation at the moment, we're dealing with a monster with no moral implication. It's not going to talk to you. It is just here to murder things in the night.
Yeah.
So there's no character development for the monster. So showing it early is potentially showing your hand too quickly.
Well, and we say early
I mean, this
in
is
a rough
pretty,
term.
Yeah.
This is about 40-some minutes into the movie.
It is. But we also have to keep in mind that this was meant to be an action horror. So the second half of the movie, the pacing is going to get real fast.
Yeah, and I actually wrote this down because this is the part where we really transition from kind of a boring survival horror flick to a really or sci-fi survival movie to sci-fi horror.
I also think this is the part where we switch, and I don't think it's a quick switch. I think it's a little bit of a gradual move towards where it goes from being truly a B horror film to being something that created a cult following.
Exactly. And so in the cave, she finds Zeke's stump of a leg and tries to escape through one of the shafts of some kind, and this is the only other time we get that weird distortion effect.
Yes. And I think it's a little less obtruse in this scene.
Because we saw it before, and specifically with the exact same character.
We saw it before, and we're also in a weird claustrophobic scenario here, where she's trying to escape going up. The things are below trying to get her. She's still tied through because her dumbass didn't realize how tracty ropes work. And so the distortion, while visually noticeable, emotionally doesn't play with you.
I do kind of understand this a little bit more now thinking about it again.
Yeah.
I had a similar thing happen with the Manitou Incline, where I almost died.
Yes.
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 Yes, that kind of thing. And so, as she climbs, something starts grabbing her rope, and she begins pulling her down as Riddick begins to bang his restraints back in the ship.
Yes.
This part is great editing and just kind of happenstance. The banging portion was actually just shot to have.
Yeah, for in case.
Yeah, and they didn't know what to do with it. But they added it to this part to build the tension, like Riddick kind of had that sense that something else was going on.
Yes, and it kind of reinstates him in an animalistic, killer sort of way.
Yeah.
Which we had kind of gotten away from up until this point. It starts off with that being really heavy-handed, especially with his narrative at the beginning. Mm-hmm. Then we move back to just random creepy man who murders people, and we've moved back into, this is not a human. This is a man of force.
And also I think it helps with the transition between subgenres.
Yes.
Because Riddick, up until this point, like you said, was the boogeyman.
Yeah.
And now we have him just kind of tied to these creatures, but we know now that he's not the issue that's going to come up.
They've got bigger problems.
Yes. And so as she's pulled out, something pulls her from behind, and they cut her free, and we kind of get another glimpse of the creatures slightly.
Yes. Yeah. And I know they were worried about showing too much too quickly. I am more of a fan of a quick glimpse here or there, or the outline, as opposed to just what they did earlier, where it's just the remains being found.
The pacing is very similar to that Netflix movie, The Ritual.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, where you get the little glimpses of something, but never it fully until the end.
And I think the reason why I like it is partially because I'm a sucker for older monster horror films. The 80s is kind of my sweet spot. 80s and 90s are my sweet spot for monster horror films. And those have a really hard track record of CGI failing too early in their lifetime. Yeah, well, okay. And this one, even though the CGI has aged, we're past the 20-year mark, because we are not constantly seeing the monster, it doesn't matter. that the CGI has aged, because it's just that little glimpse here or there.
Yeah. Well, so I do have something I will go down into later down the line. Not in this episode, but Sugi, which side other shout out, because I'm already doing one this episode. Sugi Logic stream. Yes. We talk about movies and shit on it every now and then. He was telling me he watched this documentary on 80s horror flicks that's on Hulu or on Shudder, and all of it is like practical effects from the time in celebration of that. But yes, I agree. The 80s for you and me is very much our sweet spot for horror. Yes. Or early 90s too. So
and because this one's not relying heavily on the practical horror effects, which I think they get like a weird dip where they go from being scary to being kind of cheesy to back to being like appreciated.
Yeah.
The CGI hasn't quite hit that dip yet, where we've hit a dip of like they're just cheesy if they look bad. We haven't reached the appreciation swing yet.
Yeah.
And this one misses that dip because we are not directly looking at the creature for most of the film.
Yeah, and even then, like, the CGI is still pretty solid.
And I think part of the reason is because this film is in the dark with a bunch of visual effects on it.
Yes, it outclasses anything I've seen on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Oh, for sure.
Yes. And so, now we cut back to the wreckage where, Johns makes Riddick a deal he can't refuse.
Yeah, doesn't this sound good?
I also appreciate this because this is the dynamic where we realize that they've been doing this a while. They're tired of each other, and they keep playing this cat and mouse game constantly through the rest of the movie.
Yes.
And Riddick says, you know what? You better kill me now.
'Cause I'll kill you.
Very cheesy, but great.
It is. I also think this is the bit of dialogue that's wormed its way into Vin Diesel's head, because this is the part where we get a hint of background between these characters.
Yes.
And it's some of the only background we truly get of Riddick that's not made up by Dickweed.
Unless you go into the special features, and then there's a whole Dickweed...
Of course there is.
Captain's log bullshit.
There is. But even that plays off of the curiosity of like, well, how long have they been going at this? Why is this the only man chasing Riddick?
Yeah.
Sort of mindset, which helps add into a cult classic. People need stuff to think and talk about. Yeah,
exactly. And so now we have a montage of preparing to leave for the trip, or leave back to the camp.
Yes.
And we do get back to the new schooner, shuttle, or whatever it's called.
Yep.
Where Riddick lays out the escape plan and how the shuttle will work despite it being really temporary. A last-ditch Hail Mary bullshit.
Yeah, but you know what? Is it better than being on this demon planet?
Yep, exactly. And as they speak, the water begins to work, and so does the ship. But they need more cells, because lo and behold, they can't just bring all the cells they have.
Yeah, this is the equivalent of going to the store buying exactly 4 AA batteries to get home to realize you need 8 AA batteries, and you should have bought the 12-pack.
Yes. Yeah. And so, in the meantime, while they're figuring stuff out, Riddick has gone exploring.
'Cause of course he did.
And so as one of the Pilgrim children, and Jack, who is now fully mimicking Riddick.
Oh, she has gone head first into the deep end of the psychotic pool.
Shaved and everything.
Yes. She reminds me a lot of those teenagers who, like, worship the terrible person, and then later in life they're like, wow, that was a dumb life choice. She never gets to that dumb life choice part.
In this movie.
And,
well, in the next one she does have that stupid well...
Nope, she goes farther in the pool.
Scratch that, we have the animated movie in between.
That's true, okay, the animated movie... And then the next one, and I would argue in the next one, she just continues down the pool until she hits the bottom.
I barely remember her in the next two.
She goes to prison to get a shine job.
That's the only part I remember, and then realizing it was a bad life choice.
She realized it was a bad life choice because she couldn't get back out. Once she gets back out, she continues to be a murdery asshole. Just like Riddick.
Yes. And so, as we mentioned, this is actually the part where Riddick really hurt himself.
Yes.
When he went to pull the tarp off of Jack, he threw out his shoulder because the tarp was locked down because of heavy wind.
Yeah, because this is an actual desert, and wind is a thing.
And this is the injury that would bug him the rest of the movie, because as he tried to do his own stunts, he would tweak it and hurt it just that little bit more every time.
Kept landing on it, kept using that arm, and boy howdy, didn't the doctor tell him not to.
Acting.
Acting.
For the arts.
That's very much so. But with Vin Diesel.
Yes. And so, while exploring the core room, as everyone hopes to get out, Riddick is thinking that they're all dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if the murderer thinks that this is a bad idea, it might be a bad idea.
Well, not really a bad idea, just he's very pessimistic in his outlook.
He is, and for someone who has narrowly escaped being caught multiple times, that's not good.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as the coring room roof opens, Ali, the Muslim child, is torn apart by tiny creatures, and the crew finds him dead, because, all of a sudden they're worried that everyone's kind of gone on their own thing.
Yes.
And this is probably the cheesiest transition in the entire movie.
Yeah, this is the one that feels most like a TV transition.
Over the dead kid's skull, or meat-covered skull.
Yes, they didn't do a good job of cleaning this kid off.
One of his eyes has become one of the sun's.
Bum, bum, bum.
And we also learned that the geologists did not escape, as they died in the coring room.
I will applaud that there was some attention to detail in the coring room. The background dates the numbers on the samples do line up with the math that they had all created for this world.
Yes.
Date-wise and time-wise. And
because the coring samples state that they're from 22 years ago, and we now have the dilemma because that little planet-turny thing that we saw...
The orbiter?
Orbiter. Planet-turny thing. I like
the
that.
planet-turny thing.
Yes. We're right in that timeline.
Oh no, had bad luck. But actually, this, how bad of luck is this? They show up right before this, once every 22-year event happens.
If their dumbasses had brought all the solar cells they had from the crash ship that's totally going to be taking off anytime soon.
Yeah, they would have avoided this completely, but where's the fun in that?
Yes. I also love the line, "You're not afraid of the dark, are you?"
I like it too, because apparently this line was cut from a different scene, and it was meant just to be said between Riddick and Dickweed, and instead they recut it so it was spoken to the entire group.
Yes. Must have missed that in my listening. Either way. Yeah, I still...
It's a good line.
That's the thing I love about, some of these edits is, they did such a good job with keeping this movie pretty concise.
Yes. There's not a lot of fluff for a sci-fi action horror.
Yeah. And so, back on the shuttle, John explains to Carolyn that, Riddick's plan is the same he used to escape the prison. And side note, he killed the pilot. Whoopsies. Which Riddick immediately afterwards was listening in, levels the playing field, with a new toy that he's acquired that Johns has brought up that, hey, you're not supposed to have that.
Yep.
He's like, it's a shaving utensil.
It's for my bald head.
Yes. In axle grease.
And I like how he's shaving with axle grease, and Vin Diesel thought this scene was really gross. Oh. And granted, it is pretty nasty, but it hit the right target audience, because up until this point, we've hit just about all the other horror target audiences. We've hit the ladies who like horror, we've hit the young adults who like horror, and now, because of this scene, we have had the guys, the dudes who like horror, because... And I quote, "Any man who can shave his head with axle grease is a true man."
He wears affliction. Shops at Buckle.
Yes. Exactly.
Yes.
and so while it is nasty, it is dude bro-y, and thus solidifying Riddick as even more of a rounded character than he was before, and possibly more of an asshole. Yes,
because immediately to level the playing field, he corners Carolyn and helps build up the very heavy sexual tension between the two, because Diesel, as he said in his in the commentary, he tried to invade her space as much as possible.
Boy, he succeeded.
Also being sinister, because she looks... it feels like...
She looks uncomfortable as hell.
It feels like they told him, okay, this is the scene we're doing, And then Riddick got real close to the face without touching the face.
It very much feels the I'm not touching you thing.
Exactly. And if we had a camera going, my hand got real close to Chris's face.
Yes. It reminds me a lot of that, like, professor or boss that you have when you're really young in your career who hovers just awkwardly too close to the back of your chair.
Yes.
And you're like, you need to leave. But they're not touching you, technically.
I do that with my cats constantly.
Yeah, but that's your cats.
Yes.
They're cats.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still invading personal space.
But you also feed them.
Uh,
And they invade your personal space when you're asleep, so, like...
They do not, actually.
It's too hot now, in the wintertime.
No, I'm okay with the cuddles. They don't do anything outside of that, because they have learned I will grab their feet. Yes. Also, in this scene, Riddick reveals that Johns is not a cop.
No, which, if we had our inklings on, like, good cop, bad cop before this, because, A, he's lied to the group, kind of. Not lied. He has not told the whole truth.
He has not said anything, which everyone's assumed.
Yes, everyone has assumed a lot of things. He's said things about Riddick that are true, but he's left out a lot of details that we find out later complicate the story. Granted, Riddick's still an asshole who murdered people, but, like, there is more to it than just, like, this monster man on the loose.
Mm-hmm.
And, he has not stopped anyone from assuming he is the law.
Yep.
Which feels lie-y to me.
And in a way, he's an extension of the law, but not really taxpayer law.
Not taxpayer law, and the way this movie sets it up, and granted, depending on which parts you listen to and read, whether that's commentary or extras, he's portrayed in the movie by itself more bounty hunter-y than law. Which, for a sci-fi, especially space piratey sort of thing, which is the vibe this movie goes for, usually not the most upstanding citizen.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as Riddick implies, Johns has his own secret, and we cut to him injecting morphine into his eye, and the captain interrogating him that he's kind of a prick because he had enough to ease the pain of the pilot who died horribly at the beginning of the movie.
And did he decide to help? No.
No.
Absolutely not. He let that poor man suffer.
Because he's Mr. Dickweed.
He is Mr. Dickweed.
And
also, he's even more of a dickweed. And I like that the actor who plays him went ahead and was like, hey, I've done some research, and apparently the most terrible place to do heroin is in your tear duct.
Yeah, or
Let's
just
do that.
Shoot up anywhere.
Yes. But specifically the eyeball is, according to, I think it was
It was an Aussie friend he had that, or acquaintance who, he asked, the worst place he'd seen anyone shoot up, and it was the tear duct.
And, like, granted, yeah, that sounds like a terrible life choice, not only because, A, you're putting morphine directly into your eye, which is right into your bloodstream, but also, like, as they mentioned in the commentary, if you mess with the needle even a little bit, that is a long recovery.
Because Hauser did his own stunt for this, too, and everyone's like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah, and at this point, everyone went, make a note. We should use not sharp needles and fake needles from now on.
Should not do this again.
Do not do this again.
Luckily, he did not hurt himself.
No, he did not hurt himself. I will say, though, this is one of the few times that, because I think a lot of the horror movies that Riddick, like, the fans of Riddick would tie into, I don't know if everyone necessarily from the get-go of him shooting things into his eyeball caught the whole morphine thing. Unfortunately, it's not stereotypical morphine shoot places. It feels more like space drugs.
Yes.
It feels more Cowboy Bebop with the red eye thing to me.
Yeah.
And so, like, granted, space drugs just as bad. Don't do space drugs, kids. But, like, I didn't necessarily put two and two together the first few times I watched this that it was morphine. I should know what morphine is because morphine's on Earth, and that's why everyone's upset.
It just... Space drugs made me think of... There was an episode from last podcast on the left where they talk about men being abducted and milked by aliens.
Yes.
And they refer to the radiation poisoning that they come back with as space herpes.
Yes, it is space herpes-esque.
Yes. I've been listening to a lot of alien shit lately, so...
It is... We're almost at July. You gotta get that in before the 4th.
I gotta, and then I gotta harass people with it, so yes. And so now with this, we have the rest of the drama built up for the rest of the movie to be tested by the horror that is to come.
Yes, and we're also down to our last morally good person.
Yep, because the eclipse begins and time is short.
Bum.
I absolutely love this shot. This is
too.
probably my favorite shot in the whole movie of them trying to get across the desert as the planet's rising and the sun's setting.
It looks so good. And eventually Pitch Black is going to reach that point where we get like a reanimated version of it, a remastered version of it. And I look forward to the day of that so heavily because of this specific shot. Because it already looks killer. Can you imagine it in 4K?
No, because like we physically can't see in 4K, and that is another rant for another time.
Yes, and I know I can't because I can't tell the difference between when my YouTube is loading slow and when it's not. But I want a poster of this sucker.
Yes. Actually, yeah, that would be a dope poster.
It would be such a good poster.
Ooh. I might just make that in Illustrator or something.
Do it. Make it for me.
Dope. So, now we get back to the crash where everyone is gathering gear, but, surprise, it is too late. The sun has set. There's not enough solar power to get the,
And this is why you don't procrastinate on your group projects, people.
Yeah, because that's right, because, like, everyone's, like, kind of doing their own little thing.
Like, none of them were, like, there was no, like, hey, let's run back to the other ship, grab the batteries, and leave. We tootled around and did things.
Yeah, it's the antique stealer who's like, I gotta go grab something real quick.
Okay, that antique stealer, if he lived in my family, would have been left at the house. Goodbye, sir.
Macaulay Culkin his ass.
The man would have been stuck in the desert with these demon creatures by himself. Absolutely not.
Exactly. And so, as the sunlight fades, a cry is heard in the distance, and a large cloud of creatures takes to the skies.
And, this cloud of creatures resonates with my stupid vampire-loving soul. Because this is the cloud of creatures that I wanted Van Helsing's castle to erupt with, and instead we got those weird blubby gargoyles. Which I love dearly, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But this is so much more intimidating. This is terrifying. They move like bats, but also can clean a fish like a pack of piranhas.
Yeah, well, okay,
I think part of my reasoning is because they are dense. This swarm is a dense, thick swarm. To the point where if you try to follow just one of them, they purposefully cut those in and out so that you really cannot grasp how many there are.
Yeah, no, and I get where you're getting with the vampires, because I was watching Brotherhood of the Wolves with the lads, and werewolves compared to vampires, werewolves are very masculine, and vampires are kind of gay.
Yeah.
Very gay. Interview with a Vampire is two men who have adopted vampire child that they created.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I see.
Yeah, it's pretty gay.
Yeah,
and not in a bad derogatory term. It's a lot. It has a lot of those undertones.
It does, and I think that this works because of the vampire-y thing.
Yeah,
because the mass swarm, the fact that you immediately associate it with things that we already know to fear. Mm-hmm. So, like, most people have some aversion to swarms of bats. It's a pretty common scare.
Yeah.
Granted, from hearing from friends who've had bats stuck in their hair and stuff, sounds terrible. No, thank you.
Yeah.
And also the visual illustration of, like, that we've been embedded into with the vampire culture. You know you should be as scared of vampires. Granted, especially recently, vampires and werewolves have turned into something of a joke monster. And which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
I think all monsters have to at some point reach that, like, joke point.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, especially if you go back to the root of vampire scare, is scary. And
Spoopy.
is spoopy. And these bat demons from hell that are also dinosaurs, very spoopy.
And I'll get into that in a little bit. I have very extensive notes on this.
Yes, of course you do.
And so, now they all run for it as the creatures close in. Riddick and Farscape. Sorry, it wasn't Stargate, it was Farscape.
There we go. That one.
That chick dives for safety I did write her name down. It is Shazab. Flees. She is ripped in half.
Whoops.
Also in this part, there are remnants of a cutscene where Riddick gets up and tosses something aside. This was his bone shiv that he was using to shave with earlier.
Yes.
And in this scene that was cut, he held it up slightly and watched the juvenile creatures tear it apart and whittle it down.
To see how much damage they could do.
Yes, which I like because it starts... Because Riddick, at this point, is just kind of hanging around.
Yeah, he hasn't really interacted.
But he is interacting. He's observing. And I think that scene would have added just that little bit of extra of him, like, really meticulously thinking about, like, Hobbs trying to get up on the cat tree for Charlie's food.
Yes, I do think that scene would have been a good add-in, or even just a bonus, like, deleted scene sort of thing. But at the same time, we don't necessarily need it, because we do see him be the only, like, out of the two of them, he's the only one smart enough to lay flat and not get back up.
Yeah. Yeah,
and
exactly.
then he gets to watch her upper half, anyway, be carried off into the sunset.
Yes. So romantic.
So romantic. And dead.
And so, in the distance, we hear the large structures begin to crumble, and the big baddies, and they're whoop whoop.
Yes, and now we don't really get to see them, but we get to see more of them.
We get to see them from Riddick's point of view, and they specifically talked about how they changed it from the juveniles to this, where the juveniles are very flappy. Yes. These things are given mass and glide. After they reach the peak, they just start gliding down. And
seeing them from a distance, I like that they went ahead and did this, because there's not really, like, a point of reference to know how big they are. But because they move what people imagine pterodactyls fly like, kind of vulture-y, very slow, heavy, they feel big. Yeah,
and that's the thing is, they really struggled with the scale of the adults for a long time.
Well, and because they fly, they also crawl around, and they are snappy, and have kind of retractable shivs, not fully explained, but kind of shown. Yeah. And so, how big do you make your monster? Because theoretically, you could just kind of keep going. Yeah. And so, here is where I really want to talk about them. They're called Bioraptors, although not specifically called that in the movie. That's what they're called in the screenplay. Yeah, I love the name. I do too. It fits really nicely. There is very minimal description in the original draft, but it is pointed out by Simon Ward in his essay, Things That Flit in the Dark. It was similar to other creatures in the H.P. Lovecraft novella, The Dream Quest for Unknown Kadath. Okay, I can see where he's going. Yes, and that's the thing, is so much of this sci-fi horror always ties back to Lovecraft. It does. I also like their design because there's just enough of them pulled from creatures that you would recognize here on Earth. Yep. So they got the heads that kind of remind you of the hammerhead shark. They've got the bitey teeth. They're a little piranha-esque. They're a little pterodactyl-y, they're a little bat-esque, and they're also a little bit of alien from the movies. They're a hodgepodge of creatures. They are, and they also have the long, spooky tail. Yes. Well, I'll get into that in a minute. So the creatures were designed by Patrick Tatopoulos. I love his name. That is a good name. Who had previously worked on the Aliens for Independence Day, which... That makes a lot of sense. We covered now 2 years ago. Check that out. It's a good one. 1998's Godzilla. Another good one. For the practical effects. Yes. Okay, but, still got exposure. Yes. And would later work on feature films, including Underworld. I love it. Van Helsing. One of my favorites. Silent Hill. Another solid. I Am Legend, and Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. I loved the character designs in Maleficent.
That is a very small sprinkling, and that is specifically pulled from the essay because I looked him up afterwards and he has so much work he's done.
Of course he does. And I like that all of his work, while varied, the monster theme does tie all together.
Yes. And Tatopoulos' original designs were more dragon and Godzilla-like, which no one liked, and his second sketches were closer to what we see in the feature. The split tail was actually only added after, as it was quote-unquote suggested by an executive, and it was the least deconstructive change in order to get the rest of it to fit.
You know what? I understand that.
Yes.
I feel that deeply.
And those creatures were designed around what they do.
Yes.
They are blind and perceive using echolocation.
Mm-hmm.
And while reading the essay, I had some thoughts about how much of the creature is shown and why it makes it such a good movie.
Yes.
Which, get into it in a little bit, because this movie has a couple ties to one movie I specifically love, and a movie I absolutely kind of hated, but kind of want to go back and re-explore because of this somewhat revelation. So the actual creature itself was fabricated by John Cox.
Okay.
And he was selected from his previous work on the odd movie Babe.
I know it feels odd, but honestly, it kind of makes sense. Because all of the various animals that were worked on for Babe, granted there were some real animals used, but there was a lot of stunt doubles needed for different scenes, different shots, that they either had to come back in CGI or were just used as stunt doubles in the background for this or that. And this creature, while definitely alien, feels like a hodgepodge of creatures that we could find on Earth.
Yes. And John Cox, some might know from John Cox Creative Workshop, which you might know his work from Komodo, another movie that terrified me as a kid.
Of course.
2002 Scooby-Doo.
I love it.
The Korean flick, The Host.
Yes. Okay, yes. That makes sense to me.
Yep. And Rogue.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it.
I was surprised by that one, honestly, because we watched that together. I think that was one of the first movies we all watched together as a group back at Erica and Philip's first place from when I moved here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Feels odd. Makes sense to me, though.
Yeah, it's just one of those weird things where it's like, now that I think about it, I've seen all these movies and it connects.
They do. There is some bone structure there.
Yeah. And I know we've harped on it a little bit, but I still think the effects in this movie hold.
I do too.
Yeah.
And I really do think it's because they, didn't go through and show the whole monster right off the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
We get stuff from the distance, which always will age well.
Yep.
And we get a lot of things from the weird viewpoint of Riddick.
Yes.
/ no suns now.
Yeah.
Born in the dark.
Exactly.
Spooky.
And the sounds were created by Tom Myers of Skywalker Light and Sound.
Nice.
Yeah. I just wanted to go through that because I think the design of these creatures is so well put together.
It is, and I also think that the lighting that goes in from here on out in the movie really solidifies the excellence of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It turned it visually from okay, it's scary to okay, no, that is very scary.
Oh yeah.
Because if these things were fully lit up, they'd be a little scary, but not as terrifying as in the dark.
There's a reason I was afraid of the dark. And still am for a good chunk of my life. Yeah. Also, this marks the transition between on-site shooting and stage shooting for the rest of the movie.
Hooray, they're not cold anymore.
Yes.
They were so cold that a lot of the lighting technicians would turn on their really big lights to heat the actors back up.
Yep. And the stage was still in Australia, so they gotta have fun.
Yeah, because Australia's cool.
Yeah. And so, as the group tries to find lights, the creatures begin their hunt. Also, they are making a lot of noise.
They are very loud for creatures who rely on echolocation. I'm surprised that no one figured that out.
Well, them and the people. The people are making a lot of noise inside.
Everyone in general is just being very noisy.
Yes. And while Riddick is scavenging and trying to find a way out, we learn that they are already inside, and they are cannibalistic. They are. Yeah, they're already eating each other.
Which I like, because it goes ahead and addresses the fact that this is now a desert planet, And there is nothing else on this planet minus these suckers, who only come out every 22 years.
Yes, which they did want to bring in, or the director originally wanted those bones, the big bones. They were originally going to have another part in the movie later on, where they stumbled upon one just in the middle of their trek, and the Bioraptors were eating it. But that got cut because it was too technically heavy.
Definitely too technically heavy. Also makes these things feel more desperate.
Yeah.
Because they are out of a food source.
Yeah.
And these suckers are the last pieces of meat on this planet, apparently.
Yes, exactly. And so Hassan and the other pilgrim Hassan, another one of the pilgrim children, is killed.
Yes.
And the creatures fight over his corpse while Riddick is hiding and like, shit, you.
I also do like, though, that, like, the lighting for this in this scene looks really good.
Mm-hmm.
Looks excellent. Riddick is not hiding. Riddick is just standing very still.
Yes. He is Drax.
He is Drax, and just kind of, like, there's a couple of spots where clearly the objective is to hold as still as possible, because these things can see movement T-Rex style.
Yeah.
And yet he kind of leans back into the background. That's still moving.
Yeah.
But, like, it looks cool.
Exactly.
And it's supposed to imply that he can, like, blend into the shadows and disappear, which I like, but still a little silly.
Exactly.
For blind creatures, he's not hiding.
No, not at all. And so, as he runs, they actually kill one of the creatures, and we learn that light burns them, hence why they were in the dark.
Spooky, spooky.
Yeah, and after a bit of arguing what to do, they decide to stick to their plan and trek through the dark to the...
They're gonna do it.
Yeah, to the shuttle. One thing I also appreciate is the tight setting of the movie.
I do too.
Where we already know, and why there's a slow build, because we've now established some of these people have made this trek. This will be their third time doing it.
They should already kind of know the path.
Yeah, we've already established point A, point B, and point C,
Mm-hmm.
and all the distinguishing features, because everything is kept so simple and clean.
Yes.
And recognizable.
It very much feels kind of like a basic map from some of the old fantasy books that you used to read as a kid, where, like, it's like, here's city A, here's city B, here's city C. There is nothing in between, don't even ask about it.
Yeah.
And it works.
Exactly, and I'm okay with it.
I am too.
And so, it is decided that Riddick will guide them.
Because why not?
Because he can see in the dark.
He can see in the dark. Also, he's disposable.
Yeah, well, yeah, to them, exactly. And as they wrap themselves in light, apparently the skid that everything was on was actually really heavy.
Yeah, I can totally believe that.
And their struggling is real. And so as I called them, the Warriors of Light get ready to roll out, Johns warns them that this is not going to end well.
No, he has a gut feeling about it, don't you know?
Because almost immediately after leaving, the torches start going out, but the fiber optics seem to be working, but shit goes to hell as Jack grabs for a flare that dropped, Paris freaks out.
Oh, Paris.
And breaks the light rig before he dies in the darkness, spitting booze over the creatures to light his way.
Which, granted, at this point you really don't like Paris.
No.
You have somewhat of an affinity for him because he's the weird, quirky character.
Yeah.
The visual effects of this scene look so good.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good.
Well, and on top of that, despite him being an unlikable character, you do feel a bit sorry for him.
Yeah, you do feel a bit sad that he didn't make it. Because, like, at this point in the film, you don't really know how much is left. You don't really know how much farther they have to go. And it does kind of feel like he was really close.
Yeah.
Even though he was not close at all.
And he even said, like, even then, like, the last line he says is, I never even made it to Paris. And it's like...
He never even made it to France. He was supposed to die in France.
Yeah.
Never even got to go.
Yeah, it's just that little bit they add to him that really rounds him out.
And I do know that there was some debate whether or not that line was stupid. I like it because we've put in new mecha. Which implies a bunch of things, and if you're a deep thinker person like we are, implies that maybe Earth isn't totally gone. And it's just really hard to get to.
And we've continued the tradition of not being very creative at naming stuff.
Yes.
Like New England.
Yes.
Which, now that I think about it, it makes me appreciate Titan AE more.
Yeah.
Earth 2.
Earth 2 is just renamed everything, and that's what he was on his way to go see was Paris.
AKA Bob.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, while Paris dies, Riddick watches, but there are 3 creatures that are still honed in on them, and Riddick thinks he knows what's up.
Yeah.
They circle back around once over their tracks, and the Muslim leader kind of is freaking out a little bit. He's like, we've been here. I've seen these tracks.
Yes.
And Riddick brings up that he circled around to think because up ahead is Death Row, and Jack is actually Jackie. And on her period.
Ah, surprise.
And that's why the creatures have been able to hone in on them, is not because they're a light source or they're moving. It's because Jackie. And they smell blood.
It is because of Jackie. And this is literally the only thing in this entire scene, or in this entire movie, that I don't like.
Why is that?
Because it's a little bullshitty.
Yeah.
This movie came out in 2000. It is a science fiction novel in the future where we have all of the technologies available to us of the day, and thus some. And you telling me that this girl couldn't get a hold of some tampons?
That they do explain that. Cause it might be their, like, first one, too, cause they don't really explain how old they are.
There is another woman on board this ship, and last time they sent a woman to space, they sent so many tampons with her she could have survived 2 years in space. Men overpack for these occasions, and women do too. Ain't nobody not have some tampons on this space boat.
Yeah.
There were 2 women on this ship, and you telling me this girl couldn't get a tampon?
True.
Yeah, I call bullshit. I call male writing, but I go with it because this is not a new trope.
No, as they mentioned, they threw it in there because a producer said, what if we put in a Shakespearean gender twist?
Yeah, and I don't mind the gender twist. In fact, I like the gender twist.
It's specifically the period part.
It feels like bad men anatomy writing, which there's an entire Reddit thread about men who write bad women anatomy, and this fits right in there with it, because there's plenty of ways to have this not be an issue. / I think a lot of people think it's more of a thing, because they're trying to play off the whole shark thing. It's not a thing. It is a totally made-up bullshit Victorian thing that men thought up of.
But it is a true dolphin thing.
Yeah, but dolphins are also weird.
Dolphins are dicks.
And dolphins are not the theme for this movie at all. That would have been more terrifying.
Yes.
And so, like, I like Jackie being a secret girl. Because she's already a stowaway. She's already pulling from the original source material. And it fits her character better, as opposed to just being the weird, quirky 13-year-old boy who wants to be a murderer. Now she's even more of an outcast.
Yeah.
She makes more sense. It makes more sense for her to be a stowaway in the first place.
Yeah.
This is literally only the corp I have, and I'm so used to overlooking it that I kind of forget that it's a problem.
Yeah. Well, it also is kind of interesting because it transitions some of the original concept of the movie, because Riddick originally was a woman.
Yes, exactly.
And yeah, it transitions to like, okay, women can be badass and mimic badass men if they want to.
Yes, and it does play nicely into the future franchises of this film.
Yeah. Also, Riddick's kind of a dick for just like calling her out on it.
He is, but I also appreciate that instead of just panicking everyone, he's like, well, if we just do another lap, they'll never notice and I can figure out a problem to save these dumbasses. / myself. Mostly himself.
Gives him a little bit more humanity.
It does, and we do start seeing him move away from just being the murder-killer machine to, like, murder-killer machine who also feels a little bad about it, but it's not him doing the killing.
He doesn't kill without a purpose.
It is starting to be implied, yes.
Yes.
But he also occasionally is like, yeah, I murdered a bunch of people.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
He's complicated.
Yeah. And so, Carolyn now wants to go back, and with it, John wants to go on because the skiff is a couple 100 meters ahead.
Yeah.
And in the heat of the moment, they both reveal each other's deep, dark secrets.
Bum, bum, bum.
And for me,
I don't care. Do you care?
Well, and so one thing I don't like about this moment is that It could have been a really dynamic moment, but it really goes nowhere.
Yeah.
And the horror really overshadows it. Something that could have been, that was built up and important for the first half of the movie is just kind of like, well, none of that matters. Well, it's also kind of great, too, because now none of that matters. The playing fields are completely even.
I do like the playing fields being completely even. I do kind of wish that the turmoil being exposed would have happened before we hit the horror portion of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because from here on, we are so visually involved in this film. We're fully in the dark here. A lot of different shots from Riddick's point of view, which has some cool visual effects. We've got a lot of people holding flares, which give off cool lighting effects.
Yep.
There's a lot of shadows happening in the background to portray the, demon creatures coming to get everybody. I don't care about your petty bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
You got other things to deal with, and honestly, if both of you had punched each other before this, we could have all just been happier.
Yeah, but it is kind of great that they just get it done with at that point.
It's at least not a thread left unfinished.
Yeah. And for those who are curious, that couple 100 meters is the height of the Metropolitan Life building, and it's about 1.2 or 0.12 of a mile.
Yeah. Doesn't sound very far until it's filled with things coming to eat you.
Yes, exactly. And so, as they start trekking on, Riddick and Johns figure out that if they really wanted to, they could use some bait.
They could blow this joint and just kind of make it themselves if only they had some tasty morsels to leave behind.
Yes, and Riddick, who is beginning to eat, or is continuing to show his humanity, mentions that they could use bigger bait.
I do like this. I also like the way he portrays it, though, because he had already warned Dickweed that if he didn't watch himself, Riddick would be the end of him.
Yes.
And it's implied that he's like, you're bigger than the two tiny ladies back there.
Yeah.
I could just leave your ass down there.
Yeah, and what I like about it, too, is that Johns is really revealed to be the scumbag, because Riddick, the way he portrays it, he seems like he was kind of baiting Johns.
Yes, it definitely does feel that way.
Yeah, baiting him into saying what he wanted and giving him a reason to kill. Not just that Johns is hunting him and killing him would make his escape easier, because Johns is the next one who's going to turn on the rest of the group.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
And Riddick is going to get them out if he can.
Yes.
Riddick's going to look out for number one.
But if you can come along on that number one ride, might as well.
Yeah, exactly. And so now we have the big showdown between Riddick and Johns. And I love the quick cuts between the eyes. Very much like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah, it does remind me of that.
As well, there is a light skyline added to break up the darkness and reduce the dark fatigue.
Yeah, because this movie has been very dark.
Yes. And a knife fight with only one cut to kill.
Yes.
And Johns is cut. And there is a nice tie back to Riddick saying that Johns should have killed him when he had the chance.
Yeah, and you also kind of get the vibe that both of them could have killed each other a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
And they should have done that, because here we are.
Yeah, and Johns is brutally killed, and it's great. I love his death.
I do too. It is the perfect horror movie death.
Yeah.
Brutal, but not cheesy.
And on top of that, it's very much he dies by his own vices.
Oh, yeah, because if he had just kept his mouth shut, probably would be fine.
Well, not only that, because the reason his gun doesn't fire is he loaded a morphine round.
Because he's an idiot.
Exactly.
Morphine idiot.
Yep, exactly. And so Riddick catches up to the group and tells them to press on. Riddick is a dick at this point.
Yeah, but it does solidify that he is not a quote-unquote good guy. He is still an anti-hero.
He is likable, and he's a more down-to-earth dick, but he is still a dick.
He is still a dick.
Yes. And at this point, we have a little slowing. The holy man tries to pray with Riddick, but Riddick is being Riddick.
Yeah, the whole where's your God now sort of thing.
Yeah, I believe in God, but I absolutely hate the fucker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is edgy, corny, but totally predictable for this kind of movie.
Yeah, fits, and if said in any other context,
little
stupid.
asshole-y.
Yeah. But it's also a nice break between the action.
Yes, because up until this point, yeah, we haven't been necessarily directly fighting, minus the knife fight, but the drum beat that has constantly been playing in the background every time Riddick has been going has been kind of taxing.
Yeah, but also in this scene, we see Riddick really observing the creatures again, close up because he's found bones of them.
Yes.
And he's figured out, okay, well, with their eye stalks this far out, there's blind spots.
Yes.
And so, into death row they go. Riddick is carrying the cells while the others follow because he's the strongest.
Yes.
He said this part was pretty taxing because those cells were heavy.
Yes.
And
I do
again,
like
shoulder injury.
more shoulder injury. He also wasn't super happy with how his initial start with the cells looks, but the director really liked it because it reminded him of horse racing and how at the beginning horses don't necessarily look as strong and powerful as they do halfway through the race.
Yeah.
And so the director chose to keep those cuts in, even though Vin Diesel was like, I don't look like I'm doing as much as I could be.
Yeah.
And he was like, no, this is perfect, because once you get your momentum going, it proves that these are heavy.
Yeah, it's like hitting your stride in cross country.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so, now the creatures begin to slaughter themselves, and as some begin to fall, Jackie gets attacked by one, and Riddick saves her, and kills the creature in the process. But, at this point, this is where where Riddick is still kind of unpredictable.
Yes.
I don't think he is doing it to save Jackie, but instead he's using it as an opportunity to test his blind spot theory.
I think I completely agree with you.
Yeah. He's not doing, he's doing a kind act, but for selfish reasons.
Totally for selfish reasons.
And also proving that he could kill one of these creatures if he had the opportunity.
Because let's be real, Riddick has totally got that ego.
Yes, exactly. Which, oh man, I love how, like, the more you look at it, like, the more deep Riddick's character actually is.
He is a deep and heavy mix between full assholery and also accidentally helping people.
Yep. And, in this part, it starts raining too.
Of course it does. The other thing I like, sometimes I feel like I like it a lot. Sometimes I feel like I don't like it a lot. It's the monsters bleed blue goo.
Yes.
And I like it because it does distinguish them, and it feels foreign, and it feels alien. And then at other times, the part of me that loves a little bit more of the grunge horror kind of wishes it was normal blood. Mostly because it would invoke that whole over-the-top, like, horror factor, as opposed to sci-fi.
Yeah,
and this is a weird movie because it toes that line. It is both horror and sci-fi simultaneously.
Okay, I will say that it's a humanistic horror, or a mammalian horror.
Yes.
Which I like that it's not mammalian, because I watched I think it was a sci show, or it was PBS Aeons. I learned so much more about blood and how it evolved, like, multiple times, and there's, like, clear blood, there's creatures with purple blood, and it's like...
The blue blood from the horseshoe crab.
Yeah, I mean,
Their rare, expensive blood.
There's a lot of different types of blood out there.
Very true. It's just one of those classic horror tropes, especially with, like,
yeah,
the more B and grunge horror that I'm at least more used to.
Yeah, it ties back to, like, Predator, or...
Exactly.
Predator and Alien, where, like, it's green glow stick.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, like, I flip really hard back and forth between wanting it to be more squishy blood and liking the goopy, thick blue blood. Yeah,
I think, for me, thinking about it, if it's mammalian, I prefer the red blood.
We know they're more insect-esque, because they go through a larvae pupal sort of stage. At least the director mentioned that at some point.
Yeah, and the concept art brings it up too.
Yeah, so I'm not upset by the blue blood. It just kind of, depending on which mood you're watching it in, sci-fi versus horror, can either be funny or like, oh my gosh, the blue blood. Yeah.
No, I get it. So, and in this moment, the last Muslim child is injured and eventually taken away by one of them crawling up a cliff.
And our last true innocent person is dead.
Yeah, the Muslim leader is pretty innocent.
He is too, but he doesn't add the child card to the stack.
Yeah, true. And so, in this moment, the last three outside of Riddick decide to hide in a cave while Riddick will go on and come back for them.
And Riddick puts a big-ass boulder that none of them can move in front of the door, for safety.
Yep.
/ also, it does give the vibe of, like, he could be keeping you safe, or y'all gonna just die in this cave.
He'll come back at his convenience.
Yeah, if he makes it.
Yes. And so, while they're in the cave, the flame begins to wane on their last couple bottles of Jack Daniels. Which is clearly Jack Daniels in this part.
It's just got the full-on label on it.
Which is why I think part of this was they just had some empty Jack Daniel bottles on site or on set.
Yeah, because no one's drinking it.
Yeah.
It's just for fuel source.
Yeah, just like, oh, we've got this, let's go. Which is why we did not choose Jack Daniels for this episode.
True.
But in this moment, Riddick makes it to the skiff as the trio finds a bunch of glowing bugs on the ceiling.
Our only other life form on this planet.
Yes. Which apparently these were a pain in the ass because the glowing fluid in them only lasted like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And so they had them be digitally made brighter because by the time they injected them all and get everything lit, they were super dim.
For those of you who have tried to buy glow-in-the-dark stars before, you're fully aware of the struggles of getting good glowing things, let alone keeping them glowing while you try and shoot something.
Yep. And in this moment, Riddick also breaks his lights.
Whoops.
Showing he's not coming back for them, and he's getting ready to take off. While back at the cave, there's a hacking at the entrance, and Jackie is saying, he'll come back for us, I just know it. And bullshit.
Jackie's dumbass. No. He's not coming back.
But Carolyn actually left and confronts Riddick.
Which I think if you're gonna give her a story arc, this is her finally standing up for herself.
Yes.
As opposed to just letting the responsibilities happen.
Yes. Because this is actually the part where she admits that now she would die for the cargo. And she is taking the helm of the captain. She will go down with the ship.
Yes.
Which also at this part adds the romantic sexual tension because
yeah, of course it does.
Riddick lets her kick his ass because he immediately flips her over, pulls her down like, hey, babe.
And also invites her to leave with him.
Yes.
Which is one of those things where, because they went ahead and played up the sexual tension for this film, implies the interest, but also you could also read it as him being like, hey, you were the only other badass to make it over here by yourself. Yeah. You can get on the ship. You
have some of the instincts that I have.
You can get on board and, if we have time, we can go get that weird-ass kid who shaved her own head.
Yes. And so now we cut back, which, great use of parallel action. It was actually Riddick hacking away at the entrance.
Of course.
And Jackie is full of shit when she says she never had doubt that Riddick would come for them.
Which... yeah, she's full of shit, and yeah, you're mad at her, but also re-solidifies that, she's just a dumb kid.
Yeah.
And, she's idolized him, and she's just lucky he didn't leave her.
Yeah, honestly, at this point, she's kind of the only person who's really kind of seen through Riddick.
Yeah, I think initially it was false scene, and by this point in the movie, it's implied that she actually can tell that he's a good person.
Yeah.
But at the same time... this is the same man who was about to leave all of their asses on the planet.
Yeah.
So I think she's rosy-tinted glasses this a little bit.
Hardcore. And so, as they run, there's a little bit part that I like, where Riddick's running behind them, and there's a part where he slips on the hill, and there's a little bit of panic. They don't bring it up in the commentary, if I remember right.
Yeah.
But it feels like Vin Diesel kind of actually slipped on the mud, and so the panic feels a little bit real, but I also like it because as badass as Riddick is at this point, he's still kind of afraid of the creatures.
Yeah, because there's an entire sky full of them.
Yeah, who are killing each other.
Yeah, he can maybe take one, not all of them.
Yeah, because as on the way back to the ship, he kind of gets a little lost and gets cornered by one of them, and it looks like he's going to get out, but another one appears behind him.
Yes.
Which, we really get the creature vision in this part.
We do. It looks so good.
Which, if I remember right, I think the actual image of Riddick is his stunt double. It's not actually Riddick.
Yes. And his stunt double played his stunt double and also was a couple other places throughout the film. Which was fun watching Vin Diesel point out him and be like, that was my stunt double. There he is again. Look at him go. Very
similar to me. And so, they're waiting for Riddick to come because he came for them. He comes out stumbling bloody, and Carolyn supports him but is killed by a creature.
Whoops.
She has died for the crew. Riddick is part of the crew now.
Riddick is part of the crew, but also, like, that was the pilot.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be convenient if there was someone who knew how to fly a plane?
Well, it's already mentioned that Riddick knows how to fly.
Yes, it is.
Because Johns warns Carolyn that he killed the pilot because he knows how to fly and was going to get out of there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, Riddick makes it back to the ship. They blast off, not before blasting some bitches out of the way.
Because, of course.
Yes. And in space, they agree that Riddick died on the planet as they fly over the rings and off into back into deep space, which another dope shot in this movie.
Another dope shot.
And that's Pitch Black.
That's the whole thing.
So first off, Pitch Black's initial release was mixed.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's not surprising.
Financially successful.
Yep.
But it missed for some audiences. And I get it.
I do too. I also think that science action plus horror is a genre that has notoriously been missed with critics. It is usually not a favorite because it's a lot of things going on all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on your personal preference versus what you feel like the movie should have been can really opinionate a lot of critics.
Yeah, or like in my case when I recently watched Peninsula, it's very muddled in trying to do too many things at once, and that's why it falls apart. Pitch Black, on the other hand, very much has a similar transition to like Titanic.
Yes.
Where there is a clear line of when the movie stops being a sci-fi survival and turns into sci-fi horror.
I agree. But unfortunately, it's one of those genres that, depending on the critic, and most critics, not a fave.
Yes. And also for me, had one of the weirdest promotionals.
Yeah. We really did.
Was not expecting this. Rave World, where it was a series of raves to promote the movie.
Yeah, it wasn't super successful.
It was weird as shit.
It was weird as shit. Also, like, I distinctly remember that because this movie was advertised fully as a horror film, there was no big names attached to it. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a ton of just, like, general advertisement for it. It wasn't given, the whole, like, summer blockbuster hit, come see the new horror. It just kind of showed up, and if you were in the loop, you knew about it, but you kind of had to wait for this sucker to come out on DVD.
Yeah, and I don't know how it was in the States, because I was in Germany when this movie came out.
I remember people going seeing it. I remember friends being like, oh, I got to see this horror film. My mom took me. Aren't I so cool? Yeah. Or, an older brother would take them or something along those lines. But for the most part, this wasn't like and for the early 2000s, a lot of these got like an obscene amount of commercials would be put out for them. Because it's kind of the only way you got to know what movie was coming out. There wasn't online trailers. You didn't really Google trailers coming out. You had to already know about it, though. Yeah. This didn't really have that. You just kind of showed up at the theater and you're like, I guess I'll go see that.
Yeah, I don't know. Because when we lived overseas, we specifically planned what we would go see because we were limited on what was actually over there, and plus driving to Luxembourg was an hour, so.
I think this one got lucky in when it came out in two folds. So it got unlucky because it was pre a lot of like the internet pushing the more not mainstream films. Yeah. But it got lucky in that people spent a lot of time at the theater at this point. You went and you kind of would go see one movie, and if another one looked good, you just kind of stuck around and you went and saw that one too. It wasn't uncommon to watch 2 or 3. You just spent the whole day at the theater. That was pretty standard for a high schooler at this time period. Okay. And
different for me because like
theater hopping was a big thing in the 2000s.
I didn't have that option because like on bases we had like 1, maybe 2 movies showing a night.
Oh yeah, this would have been something during the height of the AMC 8-12 theater movie franchise. Okay. So you'd buy a ticket, and if you were one of those punk kids, maybe you'd sneak in to go see this one after you saw the one you already went to go see. Interesting. / some people would be nice and go pay for the second movie. So, like, it would have had some word of mouth. There definitely would have been, the high school gang would have gone and see it. It just didn't have a whole lot of the push. Okay. But that didn't stop it
Interesting. Yeah, and I mean, I've been thinking about this movie quite a bit too, because it fills this weird little niche where it's not really Alien, but it's not Aliens.
No. And I think this movie hit its true stride once it hit home release.
Yes, I completely agree with that, because that's how I saw it.
Same.
And for me, and this is what I was thinking of earlier, is, like, I love this movie, and I love Alien.
Yeah.
Absolutely hated Underwater, even though they're kind of basically the same movies.
Yeah, I can see why.
Just different settings. I do want to rewatch Underwater. I think I have my inklings of why I hate it. Underwater's a little bit pretentious compared to the other two.
Yeah, I can see where you're going.
Have you seen Underwater yet?
Yeah, it's been a while, though. I liked this one so much that I bought it. Same
here. Well, specifically in Underwater, there's that one line of, we thought we were digging too far, and now the Earth is taking it back. It's like, fuck off.
Yeah. I also think that by the time this came out on home release, enough of the edgy crowd had seen it that you knew someone's brother who had it.
Yeah.
Which is how I saw it. I didn't actually buy it first. I had a friend who was into horror. Her brother saw it, and had bought it, and she was like, oh, if you like that, you gotta watch this. And it was like, friendship established.
Well, and I also think part of it is the heart of it.
Yeah.
Because all of these people are just travelers, working class people.
Yeah.
Same with Alien. They're just freighters.
Yeah, in the wrong spot.
Yeah. Underwater is scientists and
people
engineers.
Who should have known better.
Yeah, just stupid stuff like that. And I think maybe that's just like the heart and like the depth of the characters, honestly. Because even like the ones that are very minimally in this movie, they have something to them to kind of root for.
Yeah, I also think that this one, that Pitch Black helped create the Riddick franchise because there was enough mentioned that people could talk about it, you could question it. If you were really into it, you could rewatch it and analyze the absolute crap out of this movie without messing up its own story.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like, each of the characters were almost a caricature, so that way you didn't have to feel like you had to learn anything.
Yeah.
You could just go along and not learn anyone's name, and you did just fine.
Yeah, and I think that holds something true to it, too, because, Pitch Black was a standalone feature.
Yeah.
There was no sequels planned.
And honestly, I bought it before it had sequels.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of us did, and then when the animated one came out, a lot of us went, oh, okay, well, that's fun.
I didn't find out about the sequels until college.
I think those of us who were really into it heard about the animated one coming out, because that was kind of early YouTube sort of stuff being thrown around. People would start sending links to each other.
Okay.
You know, grapevine sort of internet was really getting established. And then by that point, it came out on a DVD set with all three. So it came out with Pitch Black, the true live action second one, and the animated one on it. And so for those of us who were originally just casual, owned the first one, the next one came out, and you're like, oh, heck yes, I'm buying the second one. Bonus, it's not the second one. It's the third one, and you didn't even know about this animated one that they had.
Yeah, I think that's how I found out about it, too, because I'm looking at the dates, and the second one came out when we had just been back in the U.S. maybe a year.
I think a lot of people, that was the only way they got the animated one, unless you had a friend who was really into it, which not a lot of us did.
Yeah.
A lot of us had people who liked the first one, but by the time that 3-box set came out, that's when people really got into it.
Yeah, because Riddick didn't come out until 2013, and we were both in college, almost done with college at that point.
And I think that helped also, because Pitch Black was really good, a lot of us liked it, but unless you were really into this specific genre of horror, you owned it maybe, but you didn't rewatch it necessarily. You didn't force a friend to watch it. But when Riddick came out, people started really getting into it and then going back to Pitch Black.
Yeah, I can see that. And, I mean, the biggest driving force between even having anything past Pitch Black was Chloe and Diesel, who both wanted more Riddick.
Can't blame them.
Yeah, which, I mean, I'll say with varying success to the sequels, but everyone wanted more Riddick.
Yeah.
I mean,
people still want more Riddick.
Yeah, and originally Riddick was supposed to be the character who died.
Yeah.
But was changed in production to make sure that they could do sequels, because the studio didn't see Carolyn's character have any sale after Pitch Black, but I don't know. I just...
It is one of those odd franchises where it took just long enough in between new updates to happen that even though I love this film, I love this franchise, I don't regularly check to see if more stuff's coming out. Yeah,
because I just pulled up Wikipedia and there's a 4th Riddick movie potentially coming out still.
They've talked about it for a long time, and then on top of that, they've released a couple of books, I think.
Yeah, there's been comic books, motion comics and stuff. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of crap to this now.
There's more lore out there, but it's one of those things where you just kind of rediscover Riddick every couple of years. And I think that's actually kind of in Riddick's best interest.
Yeah, and from a standalone plot movie standpoint, I think it's best for Carolyn because it really completes her arc of she would die for the crew, and thus she does.
Yeah, and let's be real here, the most interesting character in this franchise is the one who can see in the dark.
Yeah.
Like, of course I want to know how he got his shiny eyeballs.
Yes.
And why he is supposedly stronger than everyone else on this planet? Question mark?
Except for Johns?
Yeah, except for Johns, who also may or may not be person.
We don't know.
Yeah, and I like that because there is a lot of lore if you really want to. You can keep going in, between Vin Diesel and several of authors and directors, they have added on to the background of Riddick and who he is and how he's person but not really, and also maybe descended from Amazon warriors / sort of thing. And
Space Amazons.
Yeah, but actually, and it's fun, but it also doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key with Riddick and the Pitch Black specifically, is it's just fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the ending result had to have been. You got more of it because people wanted more of it.
Yeah.
And no one's out here, waiting for it. No one's making them go quicker. It's a fun side project that all of us occasionally go, hey, this is really good. We should rewatch it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And on that note, Chris, would you recommend watching Pitch Black?
I would recommend watching Pitch Black, especially if you're a science horror sort of person. I think this tickles that sweet spot. I do think, though, that Pitch Black has turned into, for me, one of those films where if I'm going to watch it, I'm going to watch all the live actions together.
Yeah.
I like watching it solo, but I think that this is one of the few franchises that even though the sequels are stupid and they mess up characters here or there, I don't care.
Yeah.
I think they continue on the fun, and it's one of those things where, I'll put this on in the morning and just kind of play all of them back to back and just have them going.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with that. From my viewpoint, I do recommend watching Pitch Black in twofolds. One, if you haven't seen it, because it is a solid sci-fi horror film.
It really is.
And two, because if you do really want to analyze it and do a deep dive like we have, it's rewarding.
It is, yeah. There's answers to your questions.
Exactly. And it's a movie that, as the director said, the reason it stands out compared to all the other sci-fi action horror bullshit that's come out since Alien.
Yeah.
It has heart to it.
It really does.
You do really quickly develop and care about the characters, and the world itself is interesting because they're just... For me, it's the layering and how everything's slowly presented and...
Yeah, definitely.
One step.
It's carefully layered so that nothing contradicts, and that works beautifully.
Exactly. So, highly recommend Pitch Black.
Definitely.
Watch it on Independence Day.
Yeah, a good one to have fireworks go off in the dark and hope that demons don't come eat you.
Ooh, I didn't think of that. That is a good... We totally planned that.
We totally planned that. I swear.
Yes. But, anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
Peace. Happy 4th of July. Eyes to the skies, baby. Because the government says they're real.
And don't blow up any arms this year.
Please don't.